I wanted to take a little bit of time today to share with you about the future of LCEF. I have to admit this is unscripted, it is unfiltered and unplugged Bart Day. So that might make my board of directors nervous, might make some of the employees nervous, but I just really wanted to share with you about where LCEF has come over these 40 years and where LCEF is going. And I'd like to start by saying it's just been a little over a year that I've had the privilege of serving at LCEF. And in the spirit of being honest and transparent and the trust that was talked about with Patrick last night, last year when I stood before you here after about 2 months at LCEF, I was absolutely terrified. I don't know if I looked like a deer in the headlights about ready to be run over by a semi, but that's sort of how I felt. I had just arrived at LCEF. I was drinking out of the fire hydrant of just trying to learn about the working and process of LCEF, the people, the culture, and then to come to the fall conference that had been all planned, it was quite a lot. So this year, I've been able to take a deep breath and step back and listen and learn at LCEF. And that was one of the things that I promised the board of directors and the employees when I came to LCEF just a little over a year ago, that I would carefully listen and learn about the work, about the mission and ministry, about the culture, and specifically the opportunities that LCEF had ahead in supporting the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and all of its agencies in their work. And I also said that I believed at that time that what was critical to the future success of LCEF actually had to do with two things: a focus on sustainability and a focus on relevance. Was LCEF sustainable in its financial model and in the services that it provided in the future? Could this be sustained? Would investors continue to invest? Would people in the church continue to need dollars to build and expand mission and ministry literally around the world? And would LCEF be relevant in a changing church? Because the church of 40 years ago when LCEF started is not the same as it is today. Not only has the culture changed, but the way in which the church is engaging the world with the gospel has changed. Last night I said a lot about providing place and space, things that were said by the early leaders of LCEF. What happens when mission and ministry are not just creating space and place anymore for word and sacrament, but they're doing other things and need other financial resources from LCEF? Will we remain relevant, a true partner of the church? And so today, I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Because I asked you last night if you believe that you are actually bold leaders. And you remember that I shared with you what the definition of bold was. To be bold, the dictionary says you must be willing to take risk. You must be willing to expose yourself to some harm or loss. So the first question I have for you today is, are you ready for LCEF, the non-for-profit financial arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, who was established to assure that there are financial resources and services available to the church as it extends its mission around the world? Are you ready for LCEF to be risky? And good for you. And what does that risk look like? So maybe I would ask Gerald. Gerald, I don't know where Gerald is, but maybe we should become a little riskier in the loan portfolio. Maybe we should not worry so much about credit and underwriting, loosen up those strings a little, and basically just fund any and all loans that come from anywhere in the world at LCEF. How about better yet, how about investments? I know Tom's here. Tom gets nervous. I love investments. How about if we become a bit more risky in our investment portfolio at LCEF? I happen to love cryptocurrency. I'm a fan of Bitcoin. I think that it's still going places. It was up to nearly $15,000 a coin less than a year ago, and it's about ready to get under $5,000 a coin. So how about if LCEF invests $100 million in Bitcoin at $5,000, 20,000 shares? If it reaches its high of $15,000 a share, we will make $300 million, a $200 million delta. Should LCEF take our investments and invest in things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Is that what risk means for LCEF? Well, of course, that's not what we're going to do, either in our lending or in our investing, to assure that those financial resources are there. So when we talk about bold leadership at LCEF, what is that going to look like for us? How is LCEF going to be bold? And I would argue that it begins by asking this simple question: how does LCEF grow the impact of the church? How does LCEF help grow the church? Now, the Lord Jesus will take care of all the numeric growth of the church. He's promised the church is never going to pass away. He will keep and sustain his holy ones. But how does LCEF come alongside ministries and help grow the impact that the church is having in the world? And that means some pretty amazing things are going to happen. I don't want to get that far ahead. I don't know if it'll go backwards. That means things like being creative and innovative, out-of-the-box thinking. And you heard some of that last night. Do you remember what Merle said, talking about Concordia High School in Shanghai? When that deal was looked at, it did not look good on paper. It was maybe not a good financial investment for LCF. But Merle said when they looked at the ministry, there was tremendous opportunity there. Rich shared in the video about a trip and work that's happening in Uruguay, in Montevideo, the most secularized country in Latin America, a country that has one of the highest suicide rates in the entire world. And yet LCF is being asked to partner with the church there in country, with the Brazilian Lutheran Church and the LCMS, to put a Lutheran university with a chapel right in the middle of Montevideo, where the truth of God's word can be taught, and where young men and women can learn to grow in the first article gifts that God has given them. Just a couple of weeks ago, I got back from Africa. We visited both Kenya and Ghana. And just a quick story about Ghana. We went there because there's a loan for a Lutheran school. It's several years old. Every once in a while, they have a little bit of trouble with their loan. It gets behind a little bit in the summertime whenever tuition lags because there aren't students enrolled. We didn't really expect much from the visit. We were really just going to kind of touch base and hear what was happening there. What we found out is since the loan was originally made for this school in Ghana, the Lutheran Church of Ghana has built other Lutheran schools. In fact, they've built 3 other Lutheran schools. And they decided to use funding from the local bank. They paid between 20 and 23% interest on those loans that had an entire life duration of 7 years. We shared with them that they have probably squandered hundreds of thousands of dollars if the partnership would have been with LCEF, and those dollars they could have put to work in ministry. Is LCF going to be bold in the future? Are we going to be innovative, creative? Are we going to create a culture and a space within the church where we truly allow ministries to dream outside the box? And when they dream and they have clarity of what that vision and mission and strategy and what their core values are, and they go to engage the world, is LCF going to be bold enough to be there with the financial resources and the ministry support that they need to continue to impact the world with the gospel? For me, the answer is yes. And it means that LCF is going to have to step out and step up and be bold in our witness to the gospel and in doing things that are continually supporting the work of the church. So for the next part, for these next few minutes, and somebody better keep me on time because I don't see time, I'm happy to take questions at the end, but I wanted to just answer 5 questions that over the last year as I travel across the church, I'm continually being asked. Church leaders ask these questions, church members ask these questions. They come in different forms and in different ways, but it always seems to be the same 5 questions. And the first one is this: what are the financial challenges that LCEF faces in the future? It's a fair question. I would say here are the short answers. The financial crisis or the financial challenges are around the relevancy of LCEF, recession, rates, and regulations. So let me explain. This is not just being relevant in a changing church, but is LCEF seen as the preferred option for lending by the entire Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? Are we keeping up with the competition? Are we better than the competition? Are we listening to what commercial banks are doing and offering to the church? And is LCEF bold enough to be relevant, to be in the mix, serving all of the congregations and our rostered church workers at entities and agencies, particularly recognized service organizations who are growing across the church? And how about the relevancy of our investors? Nearly 85% of that nearly $1.9 billion in total assets come from investors who are 60 years or older. That's to be expected. Once people get a little bit of age, they have a little money, they have things set aside, they're looking to invest, they understand the mission and ministry of the church, so they put their dollars there. But what about all of the YI Club, all of these young investors who we've been growing by the thousands every year? What does relevant look like to them for LCEF? Because they're looking to actually engage their communities and not just with dollars. Is LCEF going to become more entrepreneurial and invite those investors to be a part of something bigger with us? How about being a part of social enterprise or micro lending, things that LCEF can do? LCEF can create and invite investors to invest in very specific pools of money for very specific purposes that the church has. Will we be relevant to younger investors and invite them in early in life to be a partner with us? The other challenge is the recession. You're going to hear George speak later at the annual meeting. Many economists believe that the recession is coming, late 2019, early 2020. We're not talking catastrophic like last time, but a slowing down of the economy that could last for several quarters. Does LCEF have the flexibility to survive? Because when we have a recession, it really impacts three things at LCEF. It impacts our loans, the investments, and the real estate holdings that we have. And of course, in the time of recession, the real pinch comes to our borrowers, who sometimes find themselves in very difficult places to pay back the monies that they have borrowed from LCEF. And this is what makes us different. It's what makes us not a bank. It's why our impaired loan portfolio after the last recession in 2010, 2011, impaired loans at LCEF were over $180 million. Today, we are right at $90 million, having cut that nearly in half. And we can tell you success story upon success story from Dennis and people in the loan resolution group that we come alongside those congregations and schools and workers and we work with them through that time of recession. But that is a challenge for us, and so is the rising rate environment. As interest rates continue to rise, that prolonged period of artificially low interest rates that we have lived in is changing the dynamic at LCEF. What will it look like for us to now live in a rising rate interest environment because we've lived in the declining environment for so many years? It means that we're moving into a new period of time at LCEF, how we price our loans and how we use the cost of funds plus 2. It means that our net interest income is going to be squeezed in that time of rising market. But again, this is what we do to come alongside of our ministry partners to assure they have the resources available, and at time of recession or rates, we're blessing both our investors with good investment return and caring for those who have borrowed money from us when times become tough. And finally, it's regulations, and this is where you can glaze over your eyes, and this has to do with FASB and CECL, current expected credit loss, how we do our loan loss reserves. Many of you are aware that after the last recession, banks and financial institutions, even non-for-profits like LCEF, are going to be asked to conform to CECL, to certain new accounting standards put out by FASB, which means we are going to have to hold more loan loss reserves on all the loans that we have. Every loan in the portfolio will have to have some sort of reserve. And unlike FASB, where they typically give very clear guidance on what you must or must not do, they're only giving parameters and guidance. And so there's going to be a lot of work with our auditor, KPMG, to make sure that those loan losses are appropriate, but that we're not overcapitalized in loan loss. Because unlike a commercial bank where they overcapitalize and you don't have dividends for shareholders and they'll complain, at LCEF, the more monies that we tie up in loan loss reserve on loans is less money that we have to put to work in the ministry of the church. The other regulation issue that I'd like to share today is I'm not sure that many of you are aware that the state of Washington has put LCEF and other organizations like us who do extension work basically out of business in the state of Washington by a recent new interpretation of a long-standing policy, legislative policy in the state of Washington that has now classified us as a debenture company and putting regulations for us to conform in the state of Washington to sell notes and securities there that we simply cannot meet. And so right now, LCF and other church entities, if you do not currently have an investment at LCF, you can buy no new investments in the state of Washington. Now this, we believe, is just peculiar to laws in Washington, but we are certainly working with the other extension funds that are a part of the network called DILA and local legal counsel and people in the legislature to overturn such things. So regulations are going to change. LCF is going to be pinched. We're going to inevitably face these kind of situations. How will we respond? Will we be bold to assure that investors in the state of Washington are able to put their monies on deposit for the sake of the church and the work that they're doing? And just so you're aware, they can still loan money in the state of Washington, but it has to do with those who can invest. So those are the greatest challenges: remaining relevant, assuring investors want to be with us, being prepared for the recession, which Tom Helfrich would say that I was remiss if I didn't tell you that since the last recession that pinched LCEF, we have done a lot to get rid of real estate in the portfolio and to strengthen our capital asset ratio, which is now about 12%, 12.2%, which means we have dollars, liquidable funds available to take care of our investors, even in time of recession, even if impaired loans increase during that time. And we will learn to live in a rate environment that is particularly now on the incline, and we will deal with regulations. The second question I get asked, given the landscape of the church and how it's changing, what does lending look like in the future for LCEF? Congregations remain the core of all lending at LCEF. This is the purpose for district vice presidents who work there with the districts to know the mission and ministry happening locally, to be with those congregations and Lutheran schools and others, but primarily the congregations who make up over $1 billion of lending in the LCEF portfolio. Now, most of you are aware that congregational lending as an overall percentage of the LCEF portfolio is actually declining. Last year, we shared with you that in the entire loan portfolio at LCEF, for the first time in our history, less than 70% of the portfolio was made up of congregational lending. Last year, it was about 69.7. This year, that percentage is about 67%. Now, here are a few things to keep in mind. Over the last 5 years, congregational lending, the number of loans that we're making, is actually increasing. Congregations are working, congregations are expanding, they are growing, they're engaged in ministry. Also during those 5 years, LCF charged off about $25 million worth of impaired loans that were connected to congregations of the church. So it's important that LCF be at the table with our congregations all along the way, and this is what makes us unique. We bring something that commercial lending and banks simply do not. We can walk alongside congregations long before they need loans, to invite them to dream, to share the demographic information with them about who is in their neighborhood, to use ministry support products like Vision Path, to sit down with them and ask, do they have clarity about who they are serving and what they could be doing? And then invite them to boldly step out into those communities and serve the people who God has placed around them. So Congregation Lending will remain at the core of all that we do and the focus of our work. And I believe there are great opportunities in Congregation Lending in the decade to come. But beyond that, I shared with you last night that there is a lot of lending that is happening far beyond the congregations of the LCMS. And these are pretty exciting things. The two fastest growing segments of borrowing at LCEF are, anyone want to guess? Who are the two fastest growing segments? Lutheran schools and recognized service organizations. This afternoon on the panel, this is why we chose the people to speak to you, to actually tell you stories about the impact that Lutheran education is having in the church and how our recognized service organizations are working sometimes out on the fringe in difficult places, navigating federal funding and all kinds of things, and yet impacting the world with the gospel. These are the fastest growing segments of lending at LCEF. I'd like to say this because I had the opportunity to talk with the CUS presidents a couple of days ago. LCF has opened a dialogue with them for the last several months to ask them, where are the schools of the Concordia University system going in the future? Where are you dreaming? What does higher education look like in the LCMS in the next 5 to 10 years? Because LCEF needs to be ready to go along with you. Nearly 12% of our entire loan portfolio, over $180 million from LCEF, are borrowed dollars to the Concordia universities, the Concordia University system, not only the historic debt, but the lines of credit that they use. We have a large interest in the growth and expansion of those universities. Here's what they told me. Higher education in the LCMS is going to look radically different in the next 5 years. And what they need to continue to thrive and grow is large capacity of dollars, a lot of money that allows them to engage the world with the gospel in creative ways that bring students right into their doors. When I worked across the street at the LCMS, we spent a lot of time trying to understand the trajectory of the church. All of those demographic studies that were done out of the Office of Stewardship about what was declining in the LCMS, the decline of people in the pews, the decline of congregations. I know all about those studies. I was a part of putting those together. I was in the Office of National Mission, which I helped to head. It is true that the church is declining. The number of butts in the pews on Sunday morning is declining. This is an issue. It is a concern. It's not just an LCMS problem. It is a problem that is happening across the entire landscape of American Christianity. It should be a wake-up call to all of us to more vigorously engage the world in which God has placed us. At the same time, do you know how many thousands of parents who are unchurched, dechurched, loosely churched, however you want to categorize them, young, disconnected. Do you know how many thousands of those parents and students are paying to come into our Lutheran schools so that we can tell them about Jesus? The very people that the LCMS is most trying to attract and bring into the church are already in our schools, specifically in our universities. The universities are the tip of the spear for the LCMS to engage the culture in the world. Our Lutheran higher education institutions are not dominated by our LCMS children. They are other people, and they are paying to be in those schools to receive a worldview completely different than they receive in a secular university, and we are able to tell them about Jesus. I'm here to tell you LCEF is going to stand with our Lutheran schools. They are the most latent resource in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod to expand and grow the future of the church and the gospel around the world. And LCEF is here to support our schools. Early childhoods are growing, elementary schools are growing, high schools are growing, and certainly the universities are right there on the front line. And recognized service organizations are doing the same, particularly in senior facility growth living. And this is part of the reason why congregational loans in our portfolio are a smaller portion. When you do a chill loan at your congregation and put on a new roof or you fix up the basement, those are great things. We love being able to be there to help you. When a senior service facility comes to LCF and says we want to build a new $30 million facility, it takes an awful lot of chill loans and new roofs to equal $30 million. So they're growing and engaging the world, and these are two great opportunities. The other one that should never be forgotten is our rostered church workers. Do you know that over $100 million, $122 million, I think, are actually loans to our rostered church workers? We are serving them where they are. And with recent partnerships with the credit union, LCEF was only serving 16 states. Now the Lutheran Federal Credit Union is able to serve all the rest so that our rostered church workers can be cared for. Their financial wellness, their health, teaching good stewardship, but allowing them to have the resources to have homes, to consolidate debt, education, and otherwise, so that they can be free to do the work that God has called them to do. And the other great opportunity, of course, is international lending, which I shared with you. The only story I didn't share is that we broke ground at Concordia, Hanoi. I think it was in one of the videos that we saw. And I'll be back there in just about a year. And I think Steve Winkleman is here somewhere. I don't know if he's here this morning. But Concordia, Hanoi is growing and thriving. And more than that, the Concordia brand, our Lutheran school in Shanghai and now in Hanoi. And if you didn't know, Concordia International School in Shanghai last year was rated and ranked the #1 international school in the entire world. That's amazing. And that Concordia brand is being asked to come into other countries across Asia. There is opportunity for Concordia to offer that kind of education, Lutheran education to children literally across Asia. And again, LCF wants to be there to help make that happen. And finally, the changing landscape, if you look at lending in the future, and saying this may get me in trouble, but I'm known to say plenty of things that get me in trouble, is that I think there is opportunity to lend to other Lutherans that are not a part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Other church extension funds in church bodies like the Wisconsin Synod, the ELS, the recent financial issues with Lutheran Church of Canada. There are large conglomerations like the NALC, people who came out of the ELCA and now have no connection to formal church bodies. I believe that there are opportunities to actually borrow to other lenders that are Lutheran within the United States who may not have access to the capital and the mission and support that LCF could bring to them. No, it doesn't mean that they would get any of our earning distributions. So Synod and 31 member districts, don't worry, you'll still get $2.1 million every year. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't borrow to those people and help engage them in the ministry that the Lord is calling them to do. What would you tell a potential investor about why they should invest in LCEF? I get asked this question a lot, typically by people who don't know too much about LCEF, and they just rather honestly say, why? I've started to say this: if you invest in a bank, they will build another bank. If you invest in LCEF, we will build the church. And that's a big difference. Your money is lent, but it is never spent until the Lord Jesus returns. This is the invested dollar, the ability to pool billions of dollars of resource and revolve those funds that ministry can happen. You see, LCF is the most effective and efficient means to match people who have financial resources that they're happy and willing to make available with ministries that need those financial resources. And the investor benefits because they get a good rate, and the borrower benefits because they get a good rate. And at the end of the day, the kingdom of God is who wins. And that's why people should invest at LCEF. We're not asking for all your money. It's not where you put all of your portfolio. It's where you put some of it. But you know that those monies are going immediately to work. That's why we're raising the $100 million of new capital, because that loan demand is so much. We're projecting well over $200 million in new lending each of the next 3 years. As I shared last night, $100 million in the first quarter of this year alone. So the demand is there. This is also with the 40-month note why we put the cap at $40,000. We want new investors, young investors, to come along and see the mission and ministry that they can be a part of at LCEF. Oh, I guess I should actually put that on the screen, huh? Here's the question that I get often asked, especially by district presidents. What will really be different with the regionalization of LCEF? How many of you have actually heard about the regionalization of LCEF? Can you raise your hands? I'm guessing not many. Some of you. So over 3 years ago, LCMS made a promise and a pledge to the districts of the Synod that we would regionalize, that we would open 3 offices across the country to better support the church in its work. Now, I've used this analogy before. So when I came to LCEF, regionalization was a cake that was in the oven when it was being baked. Okay, and it was in there, and it was baking along just well. And I came to LCEF, and I wasn't quite sure what regionalization meant. And I wasn't sure exactly why LCEF was going to do this, because I've read all these business books, right? You're centralized, and then you decentralize. And then what do you do a few years later? Then you re-centralize on back, right? This hem and this haw, right? So I wasn't sure exactly why we're doing this. What's the purpose? What's the benefit? What's actually going to be value added to LCEF? And what about to the church and the districts we're serving? So I took the cake out of the oven, and I've set it up on the shelf. Left the oven on, but I've taken the cake out to step back and ask those questions. Why are we doing this? To what purpose? How does this better serve the church? Well, I want you to know today that promise and that pledge that LCEF made is going to happen. And I believe that regionalization is not just a new way of doing business. It has the ability to be transformative to the entire church, not just to LCEF, but to other entities and agencies that might come along with us in the way that we provide services to districts. Because the purpose of regionalization is this: it is to increase the service and support that LCEF provides to our district vice presidents, those people who are working in the district, with the district president, with the mission exec, with the congregations and schools and workers and RSOs in their district. It is support them so that that mission and ministry increases. It is LCEF's ability to become more nimble, more responsive to the needs of the church, and drive resources closer and closer to the customer. As one of my favorite regional vice presidents, who I won't name, likes to say, it is St. Louis getting itself out of St. Louis. So it's not just about 3 offices. This is about a cultural shift with the people who work in St. Louis about how we will deliver those resources into those regional offices, so that district vice presidents are better supported and the districts themselves are able to grow and thrive. Now, we believe there are all kinds of other things that can come along with regionalization. The other agencies and entities of the Synod that could come with us. Foundry Commercial, who LCEF has worked with for many years, in real estate, property management, is working in our regional offices. They can bring huge help and support to congregations and agencies within a district. We believe there are huge opportunities for partnership with the LCMS Foundation. And we're looking into those partnerships and how might they come along in the regional office to get closer to the same sort of people who are investing with LCEF during their lives, want to set up those estates and bequests for the future. And on that note, do you happen to know that LCEF receives between $1.3 and $2 million a year in bequests? Who leaves their money to LCEF? I have to tell you, I was absolutely flabbergasted to find out that people in their wills leave unrestricted dollars to LCEF. Why would someone do that? Because they know that those dollars stay in the loan pool, and those dollars are going to be available in perpetuity long after they're gone to drive the mission and ministry of the church. It is wonderful. So partnerships with the foundation, the ability particularly for Concordia Plan Services to come along, perhaps some of the work of the Office of National Mission and how they're working in the field. We believe these regional offices can bring support to district offices, backside services that they need, HR, IT, accounting. These kind of resources could be pooled, just as LCEF has done over these 40 years of consolidation. We can do this with districts to help provide better resources. So regionalization is happening. The 3 regional offices are up and live: Minneapolis, Minnesota, Irvine, California, Orlando, Florida. The 3 regional vice presidents are in place, but more importantly, the process and operation at LCEF in the next year is changing. And it is changing so that we can be better aligned to provide all of our services through those regional offices. So things are going to change. And I believe it's going to allow LCEF to lead boldly together with our ministry partners in the field in new and creative and innovative ways. So what can LCEF do to support a changing church? 4 things. LCEF needs to listen. LCEF needs to learn. We then need to leverage. And finally, we need to lead. The board of directors of LCEF for the last year that I've been on board has been having a lot of great conversation. They're a policy-based governance board, so they've been talking about writing INS policy and what does that look like? How does one write policies that hold the organization together and yet give us these future strategic kind of ends that we drive toward operationally at LCEF. And one of the questions that they've wrestled with is, does LCEF have a role in growing the church or in growing the impact of the church? And your LCEF elected board of directors has said, yes, we can, and yes, we should. They haven't yet answered what that looks like and how we do it. So if LCEF is going to help grow the impact of the church, we have to be willing to listen. And having those district vice presidents right there at the district, it gives us an opportunity to listen and hear from the church, unlike really any other organization of the church. We have the breadth not only of those 31 districts, but the 4 CEF districts, which are wonderful partners with us. We have all of the borrowers and investors across the church who are more than happy to talk to us about what's working and what's not working. And we're really starting to engage conversations, not only with the Concordia universities, but with recognized service organizations to simply say, what do you need to be successful in the future, and what might LCEF do beyond just the financial resources to assure that you are having the impact that you want to have? Is there capacity at LCEF, financial or otherwise? Can LCEF use this large pool of people and resources that we have across the church to bring other people to the table, to listen, and then to set a plan? And LCEF needs to learn. We've recently been doing a marketing analysis. We have an outside marketing consultant who's working with LCEF to think about, with the new regionalization, what does marketing look like? What is the new dawn of marketing? And particularly, how does marketing help support investments and loans and ministry support? One of the things that our marketing consultant has been flabbergasted over is the amount of data and information that LCEF has. Now, this same marketing consultant has also worked with the foundation and a few years ago with Concordia Plan Services. So they're also happy to tell me they're even more dumbfounded by the amount of data and information that LCEF, Concordia Plans, and the foundation have on the people and members of the church. Do you know how well we use any of that data? Do we actually have people that are skilled in data analytics, particularly around customer service and marketing, to actually segment our customers, understand our customers and investors, and care for them, those ministry partners. So we need to use better the data that we have, a wealth of data, and not just hoard that ourselves, but share it with other agencies of the church, because we know our people. We need to learn. We need to listen to internal voices and external voices, and then we need to be an agent of change as those things are implemented across the church. And I think LCEF needs to leverage. Leverage means to take maximum advantage. LCEF has capacity in any number of ways. The financial capacity is actually astounding. But we have capacity far beyond that. The ministry partnership that we bring to those services of the church are just simply unlike any other. So how do we leverage those resources? How do we bring people to the table? How does LCEF try to get over some of the infighting that we have in the church and bring all the right people to the table to have the right conversations, to get a strategy and a plan to move the church forward? I think LCEF can use our influence in the church in a positive way, not overstepping our bounds, but really helping to leverage the resources of the church. And that means at the end of the day, LCEF has to be willing to actually step up and lead, to be creative in what those new investors will look like, to be bold in new forms of lending that are perhaps more risky with RSOs and international loans where currency fluctuates and inflation and things can abound, and geopolitical issues. LCEF needs to step into a larger role to make a greater impact in the life of the church, and to do that collaboratively with others, but to do it strategically and intentionally for the sake of the gospel. And so LCEF is never going to stop doing the core things that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod has called us to do, which is quite simple. We are here to provide financial resource and capacity to the church by receiving those investments and putting those monies immediately to work in the institutions of the church. That we will always do. We will never take our eye off. As much as I might like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, trust me, where's Ron, the chairman of the investment committee? We got policy. I can't ever do that. Don't worry. We're going to keep our eyes on the finances of LCEF and continue to grow our net assets, continue to have high liquidity, high cap asset ratios, make those dollars available. But we need to be able to do things beyond just those core things and the other services that we can provide to the church. And so I hope that LCEF, when I think about the future, what we are going to do is we are going to open the conversations for people to dream about the future. And when they have those dreams and we help them bring them together in real plans and strategy, LCEF will have the ministry partnership and the financial resources available for them to change the world. The LCMS is active and growing. It is engaged. There is work happening everywhere. Otherwise, people wouldn't be borrowing the money from us that they are. We need to capitalize on those opportunities, leverage those opportunities, and boldly lead for the sake of the gospel of Jesus Christ. To him alone be glory.